Hey everyone, Coach Jacob from Next Level Powerlifting here. Today we're going over everything you need to know to improve your bench arch. So there's two main ways to actually improve your bench arch. The first one is going to be your setup for your bench, and then the other is going to be directed mobility drills trying to improve your ability to form that arch. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you are setting up on the bench properly. No matter how many mobility drills you do, if you're setting up poorly, it's all for nothing. When setting up for our bench press, we're going to start with our foot placement. Foot placement is very important for building your arch because it sets the foundation for you. If your feet are too far away, you don't have enough drive to form that arch. If your feet are too close, then you're not able to form a proper arch while maintaining your heel contact with the floor. So if you're unsure where to start with your foot placement, a great spot is having your heels directly below your knees. You can adjust this over time depending on what works best for you. Some people like their feet a little bit closer, some a little bit further, but that's a great starting point for your foot setup. In terms of foot width, having our feet fairly narrow and toes forward is a great spot to start. If we're finding that we're pushing ourselves off the bench or our hips are shooting up every time we bench, we can try having a little bit of a wider stance with our toes out a bit more. That can help limit those two things. So once your feet are set in the place that you want, next we're going to be setting our traps on the bench. This is probably one of the most important steps for your entire setup because it sets how high you can have your arch. If you're not setting up on your upper traps, you cannot have a good arch. When setting up onto our upper traps, it helps to have our hips up in the air because it has us coming at a steeper angle onto those traps. That's why you'll see a lot of lifters start with their hips up in the air once they've set their feet and now they're trying to set their arch, because it allows them to set higher on those upper traps. To set onto our upper traps, we're going to drive into the floor with our feet. Sometimes it can help to be on tippy toes so you can get a little steeper of an angle onto those upper traps. We're going to have those hips most likely up in the air once again to have that steeper angle onto our traps. It can help to bring our chin down towards our chest, so then we have a little bit more surface area across the back of our neck and more room for those traps to be set there. Once our traps are set, we have to bring our hips down to the bench. This is where a lot of people make a very common mistake of just letting their hips sit straight down. This completely removes any arching that you did because it just pulls your upper traps back down. You spend all that work setting that high angle so you would be driving into the bench really well, and then you took it away while setting those hips. A good way that you can keep that arch still nice and high while bringing those hips down, number one is bringing those hips down with a little bit more control and a little bit slower, so you make sure that you're trying to keep that chest up as high as you can while you're setting them down. If you're still finding that you're losing your arch while you're doing this, you can also open those hips a little bit wider and try to turn your pelvis down as you're sitting onto the bench. So now that our traps are set and our hips are back on the bench, the next thing we're going to be doing is with our shoulder blades. We want to make sure we're trying to pull our shoulder blades together at the back of the bench. This will depend a little bit on the lifter. If you are a larger lifter and you have a very large rib cage, it might be a little bit more difficult to get the full range of motion that you need while having those shoulder blades pinned back the whole time. For smaller lifters with smaller rib cages, it's typically a little bit easier to just keep them pinned back the whole time. So I recommend trying your best to keep them pinned back as much as you can. If you find that you're physically unable to do this, then you'll just have to work around it by having a slightly further out shoulder blade set. So to set those shoulder blades, it typically works best for me once I unrack the bar, I have the weight in my hands, and I'm able to try to pull those shoulder blades together on the bench. If you have a very grippy bench, you might want to do this before you unrack. If your bench has a little bit of slip to it and you're able to kind of move those shoulder blades while you're doing it, you can do it once you unrack like how I do. Now that you have that full setup, you're good to start benching. One thing I will remind you is trying to actively arch the whole time. So as you're bringing the bar down to your chest, you want to think about also trying to pull your chest up to meet the bar. That helps make sure that you're not losing your arch over time as you're benching. Now that we've fully set up properly for the bench and we've maxed out the arch that we currently have, let's find a way to improve our current arch through some mobility drills. My 3 favorite mobility drills to improve your bench arch are thread the needle, prayer stretch, and a T-spine extension with dowel and ball. That last one sounds a little funky, but it is pretty easy to set up. Thread the needle is a T-spine rotation mobility drill. So this means it's trying to rotate our upper spine. So while you're performing the exercise, keep that in mind that you're trying to rotate through that upper spine. One big cue I do recommend using as you're doing a thread the needle drill is trying to actively protract, so trying to push forward your shoulder blade as you're doing this movement. You don't want to just be passively letting your arm swing through. You want to be actively trying to drive it forward and reach through to the wall as you're performing this drill. This helps open up those shoulder blades even more as we're opening up that thoracic spine as well. Our next one, the prayer stretch, is going to be a T-spine extension drill. So instead of rotation through the upper spine, we're trying to extend the upper spine. So to make sure that we're extending it as we're performing this drill, we want to think about actively trying to pull our chest through to the floor. This helps reinforce that arch, reinforce that extension. The prayer stretch is great for a lot of other upper body exercises as well because it helps open up our shoulders by stretching out those lats and those triceps. So with that T-spine extension that it does, it also helps open up those shoulders and those shoulder blades a little bit more for when we're trying to form that arch. So moving on to our third mobility drill here, it is going to be that T-spine extension with that dowel and ball. I don't really have a great name for this exercise because I got it from my coach and that's just what he calls it. So feel free to make your own name for it. That is just the one that I have currently. So for this, when you're setting your back on the ball, you want to make sure that it's in that T-spine region. So wherever you're going to be arching for your bench, that's where you want kind of the apex of the ball to be. So the reason why we're using the dowel as we're on this ball, rather than just like a passive extension stretch, is because it integrates our shoulder and our shoulder blade into the movement as well. You may have seen a lot of lifters just passively sit on a foam roller trying to extend their back that way. This can work. In my personal opinion, it doesn't have the same transfer as this drill does because in your bench press, you're not just passively sitting there and you're not going to have that foam roller with you as you're doing it. Obviously, with the drill I'm saying, you're not going to have that ball with you when you're actually benching, but by forcing your body to be able to move through that extended position and trying to open up your shoulder blades as you're moving through that position, it helps transfer a lot better to the bench press. As I mentioned for the setup of your bench press, you're trying to pull those shoulder blades back. When we're doing the over part and trying to bring our arms behind us, our shoulder blades are pulling together. So this is practicing having those shoulder blades pull together while we're in that fully extended position. That's why it has a little bit better transfer to that bench press compared to some of the other options out there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to take something away either for your bench setup or your arch mobility. If you have any questions, please comment them down below and we will see you next time. Hell yeah.